In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace your power steering pressure hose on this Toyota Corolla. This is the one that brings the fluid from the pump to the steering rack and helps you turn. So let's get started. Let's remove the wheel, 21mm socket, remove all 5 of your lug nuts, and then pull the wheel off. Take the wheel off. And the reason we had to take the wheel off is because the line is located right here. This top line that you see is a 17mm flare nut, and I'm using a flare nut wrench, which looks like this. It grabs onto one extra side than a regular wrench, which you could use if that's all you had, but I'm going to use the flare nut wrench because it grips better. I'm going to try to break this free. All right, I sprayed some rust penetrant in there. I'm going to take a brass hammer, not a steel hammer, give it a couple taps. Hopefully the vibrations will help break this free. I'm not using a steel hammer because a steel hammer will damage that fitting and the line. And if this doesn't come off, well, if this is your only car, you're gonna need it. Now let's try this again. Oh, wow, it moved. Guess I'll work it back and forth. Well, as you can see, it broke free. It spun a little bit, so now I'm gonna try and keep going. If it doesn't want to keep going, I'm gonna have to work it back and forth, see if I can work that rust penetrant into the threads. Let's see if I can bring it back up. Oh, yep. All right, I think it needs more rust penetrant at this point. Little by little, that's all it takes. I'm gonna give it another spray of rust penetrant. So at this point, I broke the fitting free from the steering rack. However, the line is stuck on the fitting and it's spinning with it. So at this point, we just have to break the two free. And once the line pops off there, we can easily spin this. The problem is gonna be getting the line to separate. Try and use a pry bar and hold this line up as I tighten the fitting. Hopefully, this will help twist the line off. Okay, there it goes. That just broke free. All right, now we can continue removing the line. Now that it's broken free, I'm gonna switch to an open-ended wrench because this will give me a lot better access here. And the reason I couldn't use it before is because the open-ended wrench would have rounded off that fitting completely, and then we would have been, well, in more trouble. There you go. It spins freely now. So it's supposed to happen. Maybe I can even hold it by hand at this point. A little bit more rust penetrant. Keep in mind, as soon as this comes off of here, quite a bit of fluid will come out. And the reason I didn't pre-drain it is because no matter how much you drain it, it's still going to make a mess. A lot of fluid will still come out because the only place you can drain it is going to be at the reservoir, but further down the line, there's still plenty of fluid. So that's why I didn't even bother, because regardless, it would still make a mess and fluid would come out. So you might as well just catch it all in one go as opposed to spending time draining it and then catching it again. I'm gonna switch over to these pliers that have a nut cut out on them. This will help me drive this nut off faster. There we go. Fluid's coming out. We'll set this aside and just let it drain. The whole reservoir is going to want to drain at this point. If you follow the line along here, you'll see that it goes into a bracket here, and we have to unbolt it, separate it. It's basically like a clamshell, two halves that go together and hold both the pressure and the return light together, and we have to unclamp this. There's a 10mm bolt at the top. I will, however, spray this with rust penetrant because it is pretty rusty. Especially down under here where the threads are. And it's gonna be pretty tight in here, but grab the 10mm. You can actually go in from the front side, right behind the oil pan. this is going to break. The head of the bolt is spinning, but the threads are not. That's okay. At least if it comes off of here, I can secure these two lines a different way. There we go. Take both halves off of here. It looks like the top is bolted onto the steering rack, so we can leave that attached, and we can just pull the lines out. Now it's time to remove the pressure line, which is the lower one, and the reason we had to take the top one off is this, because the wrench goes right in front of it. So once I get my 17mm wrench on there, I'm gonna try and break it free. This one's probably gonna be just as tight as the other one. Okay. That takes quite a bit of force. All right, well, guess we have to work it back and forth. So let's spray it and push it back. I'm gonna take my pry bar, try to bend this line up and down a little bit, just like that. This will actually allow the rust penetrant to squeeze in between the line and the fitting. It's gonna break the line free from the fitting. Obviously I don't wanna snap it off. All right, so we got the same issue going on here that we did with the other line. The line's seized onto the fitting. That's okay. Let's pry it a little more. Switch to an open-ended once this is broken free, so we can get not only more leverage, but also more areas to work through, because the open-ended can be positioned in more ways on this fitting than the flare nut wrench. I'm going to try and hold this with the pry bar while I twist the fitting. At this point, this is most likely going to break, so as long as I can get the fitting in the line off of here, we can do whatever it takes to get it off. That line is pretty thick. Bring in a little handsaw and just saw it off. Be careful what you cut. You don't want to cut things that shouldn't be cut, such as the boot for the steering rack, any other lines or wires or hoses, anything that might be in the way. And just try to cut as close as possible to the fitting. There we go. Finally. And now we can just take that fitting off. And this is how stuck the line was. This fitting, the threads were perfect. They were not rusted at all. Came off very easily, but the line was completely seized up. If you follow the power steering line that we just loosened up all the way to the power steering pump, which is on the passenger side of the engine, on the back of the engine, you can easily access this from underneath the car. Right behind the oil pan, there's a large opening, so we can get a wrench on that and break this free. Hopefully, this one is not going to be as seized as the other one, especially since this car looks like it's had an oil leak going on for a while. For this, we need a 19mm wrench. Unfortunately, I don't have a flare nut wrench for this, so I'm gonna have to use the open end, which is not preferred, but it is what it is. Well, that took a lot of force, but it's loose. I actually have a stubby wrench that I'm gonna use now because it's loose enough to where I can. And this allows a lot more swing. More fluid will come out once this fitting gets loosened up enough, so keep that in mind. Have a collection bucket ready so that you don't dump it all on the ground. Okay, that's completely out of the fitting. If you follow the line right up on the power steering pump, there's a 10mm bolt we have to loosen up for this bracket that holds on the line. Get your socket on here. Okay, save this bolt, set it aside, and the line should pull right off now. Now through this opening here, let's try to pull this hose and the line down, and I'm gonna take it out this way because this is where I have the most room to work. Okay, and just wiggle it and pull it until it comes out. There's the line. Now on the new line, on the side that goes into the power steering rack, it's supposed to have an O-ring. This is a new O-ring, and I'm also going to plug up the end with a rubber cap that I have from a previous job, and this is so that when I fish the line in there, no debris goes inside the line. If you don't have a rubber cap or anything that'll fit over, you can use some tape. Or if you don't have anything, what you can do is, with both ends disconnected right before you're about to thread them in, just blow some compressed air through them. And I did the same thing to the other side. However, I want to note that the side that goes on the pump has a double flare, so there's no O-ring to remove or replace here. I'm going to slide a rubber cap over this side as well. I'm going to leave these in until I'm ready to thread it on. That way, again, no debris makes its way in here. Now we just have to reverse the process of fishing this line back in exactly the way it came. Actually, I'm going the wrong way. It's supposed to go over the axle, otherwise it won't fit. There we go. On the back here, make sure that it goes underneath the exhaust. On this end, I'm ready to start threading on the line. So I'm going to remove this rubber plug that I put on here. I'm going to grab my wrench and tighten it up. This new fitting is a 16mm. Almost bottomed out, but the line still moves around, and that's good because we need to put that bracket back on. To get this bracket opened up and removed, if you flip it over right here, we just have to stick something. I'm going to use a screwdriver, stick it right in between these two tabs and pry them apart. Once it comes apart like this, You can just bend it. Try not to bend it too much because obviously it's metal, and every time you bend metal, it gives you one less bend before it breaks. So go as little as possible, take it off. For me, it came off with this rubber piece also, which is great. You'd need it anyway, so if it got stuck on the line, just pull it off. Now let's put this on the new line. Get this rubber piece on, and now slide this over. Once it's over like that and it's centered on the rubber, just clamp it down. It should click into place, and bolt it back up. Make this nice and snug, that way it doesn't come off. That's secured, perfect. Well, now let's finish tightening the fitting on that side. I'm gonna use my flare nut wrench, that way I can get it nice and tight without stripping the hex cutout of the fitting. It's pretty much snug. I'm gonna go a little extra. Looks like this is the only way I can fit my wrench. But this being a double flare, you don't need to go crazy tight. You just need to squeeze it down a little bit so that that flare can seat and seal up the line. All right, I'm just gonna double check it, but I'd say that's pretty good. Oh yeah, if you pull on it and it doesn't move, that's tight. If you completely crush it, it'll actually not seal up because you've overdone it. Let's get the new line hooked up again. I'm gonna take the rubber plug off of the end of it. And now just try to move this line around so that the fitting can grab onto the threads. I like to spin it counterclockwise until I feel it click right there. That's how I know that I'm lined up with the first thread. And now, again, it's just a matter of spinning it until it lines up. Looks like mine started in nicely. It's threading on smoothly. Keep in mind the steering rack is aluminum, so it's easy to cross thread, but if you have to put any force into it, it's probably cross threading. So back it off and try again. Mine is going in nice and smooth. This is a 16mm size. Unfortunately, I don't have a 16mm stubby wrench, so I'm using a 17, but of course when it comes down to tightening, I'm going to use the correct size flare nut wrench. This will just help me get it closer faster. Okay, that's bottomed out. I'm gonna grab my 16mm flare nut wrench, get it on here, and tighten this up. Now remember, this is an O-ring, so as soon as it bottoms out completely, stop right there. You don't need to go very tight, so right there it's bottomed out. Give it a couple extra pushes, but that's it. If you crush that O-ring, you've ruined the seal, and it's going to start leaking. So snug is all you want for this. All right, now it's time to put on this top line and bring it close. Start it in by hand. You don't want this cross-threading. Once you get it on and you're sure that it's not cross-threading, which by the way, it's easy to do, so be very careful, finish tightening this up. That's bottomed out right there. Before I tighten it, I'm gonna make sure that the line is positioned correctly because as you can see, it can move around a little bit, and I wanna make sure that the rest of it is gonna lock in the proper position, and it looks like everything is perfectly situated. So let's grab a flare nut wrench. Let's tighten it up. This one has an O-ring, so you don't have to crush it completely. Once it bottoms out and you make it snug, just, there we go. Give it a little extra. You don't want to go past that because you will crush that O-ring and it's not going to seal. If your rubber pieces fell off, slide them back onto the lines. And now because my bolt broke on this lower half of the clamp, I'm just going to use a wire tie and tie these two together. All right, I got this kind of situated here. I'm just gonna tighten up this wire tie around it, clamp it down. As long as it's held in place, this is not doing anything crucial, so the wire tie will be the best fix for this broken bolt that I can come up with, unless you can source a new bracket. Make it nice and snug. I'm using some needle nose pliers to pull it tight. I know it's not perfect, but it's better than these lines flopping around in here. So now I'm just gonna cut off the excess of the wire ties. And I was able to fix the alignment of that little bushing as well, the rubber sleeve, I guess I should say. Now let's put the wheel on. Put back all 5 of your lug nuts, bottom them out, and then torque them to 76 foot-pounds. And double check them. On the passenger side of the engine compartment, you'll see the power steering fluid reservoir located right next to the fender. Open up the cap and let's fill the system. It says it right on the cap, use only Dexron type ATF. So if all you have is power steering fluid, it'll do the job, but you're supposed to use automatic transmission fluid. So if you end up using power steering fluid, make sure you flush it out later. I'm gonna fill it up to approximately the maximum line, and then I'll start the manual bleeding procedure, which basically just consists of turning the steering wheel left and right all the way, lock to lock, with the engine off. You don't want the power steering pump spinning at all. You want to manually push the air out of the system and pull fluid through. So, of course, it's not gonna bubble up much. The air is trapped downstream into the steering rack and the lines and everything. So at this point, with the wheels slightly elevated off the ground, otherwise it'll be pretty difficult to spin, let's turn the steering wheel back and forth, and you can watch the fluid level drop, and you'll most likely see some air bubbles coming up. Guess I have to go a little faster. There we go. Let's top it off again. Just do this until you see the fluid level stabilize, no more air bubbles come out, and then just turn on the engine and do the same exact thing. Once you've done all that, top it off with ATF, make sure it's all the way to the max line on the reservoir, and that's it. Cap it off, you're good to go. Take it for a test drive and make sure you have no leaks.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.